everyone, Kathy here and welcome back to my channel. Today, I would like to introduce you to Paul, an Irish and US citizen who was born and raised in Ireland and came to the US to live his dream and try his luck. Good afternoon, Paul. I am so happy to share this podcast with you today.
Hey Kathy, how's it going? Glad to be here.
Thank you. I will not pretend that I do not know your background, as we have been married for quite some time now. But I would love if you could share your life story with us today.
Yeah, I'd love to do it.
So now, where do we start? You came to the US in your 20s. You started as a taxi driver. You fell in love with this country, and here you are. Please give us a little background about your life before technology.
Oh wow, the dark ages. I grew up in Ireland, as you said, in 1986. I left it to, I won't say I left it to follow my dreams. That's a little bit...
So why did you leave it?
I left it because I wanted to have a nice summer in America, in Long Island. That's the reason. When I came here, I fell in love with it. I thought of New York as, big city and skyscrapers. And Long Island is where I ended up in, and it was a much different experience, but it was great. People were awesome, and the culture was really appealing to me.
So just 1 second, I'm gonna cut you off. What were you doing? I need to hear that one and make it official. What were you doing back in Ireland? And people, this is the time to take note. Please. What were you doing at that time?
I am not making this up, but I was actually a boner while I was in Ireland. I worked in a meat factory, and I would take the meat and take the bones out of it, and that was called a boner. And I was very proud of it because it paid well. It was a good job. It paid well.
Well, nothing wrong with being a meat technician.
Right.
It's the fact that being a boner that I think is very funny.
So the funny thing about it is that when I came to the States, we were very scared because there were stories about being turned around and all sorts of U.S. immigration, and because there was a big influx of Irish at the time, and a lot of them were illegal, and so I was prepared though. I had a telex drafted up. In the office that said I certified that Paul Mann is hereby a boner. So I landed in JFK with my little telex, and the immigration officer, who was a dead ringer for James Earl Jones, said to me, "So what do you do?" And I took out my telex and I gave it
so
to him.
Proud.
Yeah, and I said, "I'm a boner." And he said, No, really, what are you? And I said, "No, I'm a boner." So I thought that I was very wet behind the ears. I thought that he didn't think that I had the potential to be a boner. So I thought that he was questioning my ability to be a boner. So I pulled out all the stops. I gave him all the details about how boning and this and I think back to that guy, to this day, I think back when he went home to his wife that night, he must have said, I thought I'd seen them all. But I mean, it was comical. But
maybe that's the reason why he let you into the country.
But when Americans laugh at me for that story, I tell them, you guys let me in.
You made his day that day.
You let me pass through. I'm here. So that's why I was a boner, and I thought I was going to come to New York and be a boner as well. So some people would debate whether I achieved that or not, but I hadn't a prayer of getting in. It was all unionized, and plus they don't really think they call them boners. But so that was what I did in Ireland, and that's how I started. Yeah. So.
Hey, you were in your 20s, and it was in the 80s. So let's go back to this. So you're right in Long Island. So here you are for the summer, and you're having fun with your buddies. So what happened next?
So I started in landscaping, and I had all sorts of awesome titles for menial work, and this used to amuse me and the rest of us no end. For example, I was a lawn doctor. I pushed a mower. I was a sprinkler mechanic. I held the shovel. And best of all, my favorite occupation during that summer, at the end of that summer, I was a ceramic technician.
That sounds really technical.
It really is. And it's a very low-paying, unsexy job, and it's really a dishwasher. That's what it is. But the restaurant I worked in was super high-end, so they needed something other than dishwasher, and they came up with ceramic technician.
That is really interesting. So when did the taxi job start?
So I didn't have a driver's license, so I had a problem. I had never applied for it. And I did, and then I bought a car and for $250, and it was actually a truck, a Chevy pickup truck. So now I'm living the American dream. Now I'm in a blue Chevy pickup truck cruising down the boulevard. I have arrived. This is it. I don't have a penny to my name, but I have arrived.
Even Fonzie would not have done this.
So then I, of course, as anyone that started to drive, I was very into it and I wanted to do it all the time. So I applied for a job and I got a job as a cab driver. And I really love that job. It's like hairdressing and cab drivers have the same thing. You get personal with everyone. Mm-hmm. You get to hear their innermost, darkest secrets because that's just the nature of the job. Cabs are the same. Someone is sitting in your cab for 30 minutes. You're going to find out everything.
So now we are in the early 90s, I'm guessing, right?
We're at, 90.
And that's really interesting. A few years later, I came, so it's very funny. And to think that we could have met in the early 90s when I first came as an au pair. So an au pair and a borner falling in love. That would have been very funny. Yeah. So now, moving forward, please explain to us how you finally met the first loves of your life, namely Microsoft, IBM, or Intel.
They were my favorite things. Still are, actually. Maybe throw in Apple as well. But my girlfriend at the time, this is in 1990, I was driving a cab still, and my girlfriend went to college. And I would pick her up because she didn't have a car, and she was always late, so I would have to wait outside. So eventually she got tired of me whining and said, "Why don't you go sit in the library?" I went into the library, and there it was. There it was.
The golden child.
It was an IBM XT computer and a floppy disk. And I didn't need anything else in life beyond that. That was it.
That was fulfilled. Very funny.
That was my nirvana. So that's how I started. I felt it was love at first sight. Love at first sight. And that's all I wanted to do. And all I was doing at the time was putting floppy drives in computers and copying files. I mean, it really wasn't much more. But I had an insatiable appetite to learn.
Mm-hmm. I'm guessing you quit your job as a taxi driver?
I eased off right away. First of all, I went part-time. I was only doing it at nighttime. The cab driver was just feeding me at that point. I had my mind, consciousness had shifted 100% to computers. That's all I could think of. I would pick up people in the cab and all I would talk about was computers. I quit the cab as a real life and I was going into computers, and it was funny because in this program you talk about people making that jump. A lot of people encouraged me to go into computers, but a lot of people said, they meant well. They just didn't understand how this was going to be a livelihood. They said, you're 27 or 26 and you're too old for computers. It's all young people. And it was ridiculous at the time because computers was at the beginning. It was the golden age. It was the boom. It was unprecedented boom followed. So I didn't find that as courage. And I've listened to your other interviews and I hear people talking about that fear, but I was so possessed by computers, I didn't have any fear. I didn't care. I would have lived under the bridge as long as I was working in computers. So that's an aspect of it too. And I know I'm not the only one. I know that I've heard that from other people.
It's amazing what passion can do to people. And then very often when you live with passion, you succeed because that is an amazing drive at the end of the day.
Yeah, you succeed. You leave a trail of debts behind you, because you kind of take your eye off the ball with the run-of-the-mill things. But it paid off in the end. There was a period in the 90s and even beyond that I would jump out of bed in the morning to go to work. I just felt that I was doing something I wanted to do.
So now, I'm cutting you here because you are saying that you were getting up in the morning and were excited to go to work and work on computers, but you didn't mention how did you learn about computer science? And did you go back to college? Did you have a mentor, or how did it work for you?
I did go to college and I learned about computers, and the experience in college was the stuff I was learning was more about digital circuit boards and capacitors. And that ship had already sailed even in the early 90s, and I knew that. But the thing I got from college was that the people I was with were like me. Now I was hanging out with a bunch of like-minded people that were fascinated by technology. And I think that's what I learned the most. And that's why. So I read books, the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs, all of that. I was reading Byte magazine to cover. It takes time to turn the ship. When I came out of college, then I got a job in J&R Computer World. They kept encouraging me to go into sales and go up to sales, and I wanted to be with computers. So I ended up down in the basement. I had my stapler, and I was down in the basement.
That's exactly what I wanted to bring up. Did you have your stapler?
I was down in the basement, and then someone would come in to buy a computer. And a computer was like, at the time, everybody was talking about them, and everybody felt they needed one. They weren't just sure why. So Grandma would send her computer down to the basement to get the sound fixed, or to add a game for the grandkids, or whatever it was. And that would come down to me and my stapler down in the basement, and I would fix it, and then I would send it back up. And I was in the basement, but I was the happiest man in the basement. So
that is really interesting.
That's what I did. So then I moved on to another job, setting up networks, which was the next natural evolution from fixing computers, was networking them together in the corporate world, and that kicked me into that. I was changing jobs every year. I wanted to learn about PCs and Novell and Windows and so on and so forth. So that's how I approached it.
So that's when your fascination for Mac started, or?
No, that didn't start till after 2000. But fascination with Mac starts when Jobs went back to Apple and they started making really cool stuff again. And I think the iPhone and iPad really drove my passion for Mac and the Mac laptop, which I think is in my opinion is the best laptop.
Okay, we're going to stop here because we're not advertising for Mac whatsoever. I know you like them, but we're going to stop right there.
If they want to pay me, that's fine.
It's not going to happen. That audience is not large enough, I'm sorry. So now, my pinky finger is telling me that you're also interested in coding and programming in Python. Please tell us a little bit more about that, assuming that you're not actually interested in the world's most famous reptiles.
No, it's not little to do with the reptile and all to do with the interpreter programming language, which are in danger zone here, Kathy, because you could lose your audience very quickly if I go in and start talking about programming, because programming is like talking about math. There are some people that it turns them on, but the rest of the world, not so much.
Like myself, for example. We're going to keep it short on that question. Tell us more about your passion
but
for...
I was always interested in programming. I never did it for a full-time job. I've incorporated it into the jobs I've done, but I've never actually been a programmer. But I used Visual Basic in the 90s when I was, doing that, and then Python now is the latest. I've been interested in all of them, Java, JavaScript. But Python, I find... Python's the one I fell in love with because it's the one that you can do the most with quickly. I can go more about it. I started a YouTube channel that appears to be a solitary project at the moment because not many people share my passion, or at least on my channel. But I've had a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. So it's,
Well, tell us a little bit more. What's the name of that channel if someone is interested in Python out there?
Oh, I'd like to find them if they're there. It's Python Practical Solutions is a way to do projects like manage your home network or take data from photographs, do stuff that we all do with Python. And then the idea is that this jumpstarts your interest in using the language.
That's really interesting. So did you go back to college afterwards? Because you said that in the early 90s you went back to college, but it was more about manual labor within the computer. But I know you went back to college afterwards and you had a master's degree. Tell us a little bit more. You're all over the place. You're learning so much. You're so far from being a boner.
Yeah, so I left college. I dropped out of college, and I'm not ashamed of that. I think it was the right thing to do at that time because, as I mentioned earlier, I was more into the circuit boards, and I didn't see a future in that, and there was no future in it from what I wanted to do. So, and that was the right thing to do. But the problem is that now I'm 40 and I don't have a college degree, and I'm working in companies that require college degrees. So I went back and did online. I did kind of an aggregation I took the credits I had and a few more classes, and I finished a degree. And then after I finished a bachelor's degree, I decided now I wanted a master's. And I went to Pace University and got that for internet and cybersecurity. And I graduated in 2018.
Better late than never.
I think I was older than most of the teachers, not to talk to the students.
Talking about teachers, you could become a teacher now if you wanted to.
I did do teaching.
You did?
Funny you should say that. I did.
Just say I mentioned.
I was a professor, adjunct at Pace. I did a semester teaching kids how to defend their network. And I also gave lessons on Udemy, which is an online learning facility. So I've been active in that. I work for a hacker boot camp.
Boot camp. What is it? It's a part of the army program, or what is that?
Well, that's it. It's an Israeli company. It was HackerU, and I worked there as teaching kids how to be security professionals.
Now, it's really interesting to listen to your life story, and I really hope our listeners will enjoy it as well. I am really fascinated by the reason really where I opened this podcast is someone can change a goal and passion and spirit and so forth all their lives. So there is never a time where we say, okay, now I'm in my 40s and 50s, that's the end of it. You really did move from your 20s where you were a boner, and then today you're working and you're a teacher and you're working in the corporate world and you love computers. So now tell us a little bit more. My audience, they already know that we are moving back at some point to Ireland. How do you feel about going back to Ireland? Is it something that you're excited? Is this a loop for you? Or how does it feel to you to go back home? I had someone earlier who was telling me, going back home may feel like going backwards. Is it how it feels to you? Tell us a little bit more about that.
No, it doesn't feel like going backwards. I feel like, and this might be only in my head, but I feel like it's Ireland on my terms a little bit. I have changed a lot. I grew up in Ireland, as you mentioned. I've always kept in contact with Ireland. I have a family, I have a brother, I have a niece and a sister-in-law and a lot more in Ireland that I go back to and see. So it was always a part of it. I never left Ireland. So I know that I'm not going back to the Ireland of 1986, but I'm also not the Paul of 1986. So I'm really excited about moving back. But I'm not moving back to retire or to do nothing. Or I'm moving back to continue being a productive citizen, but just move back to Ireland, to where I grew up, to my home.
Yeah, you're way too young to retire.
Yes, that's what they say. I don't know who they are, but
well, we are young at heart. That's the most important thing.
I hope they're ready for the new Paul. That's the wild card.
Maybe they're gonna wish they would have the Paul being a boner back.
Yeah. Could be sent on my merry way again.
So I guess the journey is not ending right there, right? You're going back as a loop, but it's also to continue your journey. That's really interesting. I really love listening to all these different stories from all these people, including yourself. Everyone has a dream. We all move around and we all have dreams, and our life never ceases to be impressive. So now I understand that maybe someday you can come back to us because you have two other passions that you would like to talk about: photography and coffee beans. Tell us a little bit of a glimpse, and then you come back to us.
Well, yes, of course. The photography, obviously, the technology part of that, and I've only been doing that for a couple of years, seriously, and I love it. I try to learn as much as I can about it. And the coffee, I love coffee. I'm interested in coffee beans and how it's roasted, and I think that we're at the third wave of coffee here in the States, anyway. And I really think it's the same everywhere. I see it in France and Ireland and everywhere I go, it's the same thing. It's not like the States actually may be behind in the coffee. I think Starbucks started because the CEO, Schultz, went to a coffee shop in Italy, and that's how it sparked. So anyway, the three waves, or the three recognized waves of coffee are: the first one is, you have your coffee in the gas station, and it's just tar masquerading as coffee, unless you get them right at 8 a.m., But then the second wave was the Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. And now it's a wave of, we don't just roast the beans for commercial. It's more of a process. It's the educated consumer part of coffee. But the part that I'm interested in coffee is the community. In Ireland for years, when I was growing up, it was the pub.
Yeah.
But the pub is dying a little bit with, drinking and driving and all the other things that come with a pub. And the coffee shop is kind of coming to fruition here and there.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Paul. I really love listening to all these different stories. I've had a few interviews now, and then everyone comes up with a different mind and spirit and passion and different life stories. And maybe also you can help me with interviews who are more technical. I would like to hear about people who have a passion for all these technical sides that I don't have. So you are very welcome to come back. So thank you very much for your time. So if you're interested in participating in one of our future recordings, if you have questions or if you would like to share your adventure with us, please do contact me at bbonklody@gmail.com. Stay tuned for our next episode and always remember to enjoy your life.